Today I'm going to get out of my comfort zone, way out. I kind of tried to figure out how I wanted to start this. I've never been interested in world history, never really took it in school. It was a chore to get through geography and American history, which I really enjoyed actually in college. History for me was more about rubber tires and V8s than anything else, especially when I got old enough to enjoy racing and crewed on a race team for a while and really got involved in NASCAR and things like that. I really enjoyed it. Now, I like that history. I've got a lot of books, a lot of pictures. I keep calendars of old pictures that I've had, and it's a joy. World history, on the other hand, not so much. But as I get older, as we inevitably grow closer to the end, my curiosity has been aroused. And as I read Revelation, I try and put myself in the perspective of what was going on at the time, how things might have been affected, trying to understand what people were going through, not only Christians, but everybody. Living under Roman occupation, a dictatorship, no rights, really, and wondering what happened after the apostles were gone. So today's a what if. Because I got out my cell phone. You know, these things are smarter than the average bear. A lot smarter than me, talking with a couple guys today here at services about, well, you could just get on there and, you know, find out how to get to church, because we turned down the wrong 110 and had to double back, come down to this 110 and come down to here. So we lost about 20 minutes. Helen got car sick. And you know, we both got a little anxious, and we got plenty of time to make it, which we did. But anyway, I got the cell phone out, and I have a couple, 3 commentaries at home that I read from time to time, and I really started concentrating on world history. And so today's a what if, I guess. If Wes needs a title, what if? What if what I have in the 7 pages of notes that I'm going to basically read through, what if the history that I think was there actually happened? What does that mean for today? That's where I am. That's my curiosity. Approximately 60 years before the first century, which I've never understood how again, not interested in world history, so how come the numbers go down and then they go here and then they go back up? Never figured that out. And I suppose I could get my phone out now and Google it and find out, right? Still haven't done it. 60 years before the first century began, Rome invaded the Holy Land. Now, they had already assumed and conquered a large landmass. They're expanding at this point. Time goes by. Christ is born, lives his life, dies, gets hung on a cross, raises after 3 days, ascends to the Father. Pentecost happens. Peter gives a marvelous message. I'm awed by that, by the way, because a man with limited education like myself, standing up with no notes, I doubt he took the time to write it down, but walked out on the portico and gave that message. That's God speaking. And I can only hope that when those of us who get up here have that same luck and opportunity to let God speak. After Pentecost, the way of Jesus Christ became established, began to develop and grow. And we know that once persecution started in Jerusalem, the people who were there for Pentecost and the early spring holy days all separated and started going back to their own homes, spreading the gospel as they went. But evil was in the world. Persecution began, scattering the church. By 95 AD, all the apostles had been killed except for John. And he was exiled by, let me get the right guy's name here, Domitian. I even wrote the guy's name down. How about that? And sent to Patmos, which was an island without trees, mostly rocks, and it was a mining island. So he was probably put in the mines to work hard labor. After he died later in the year, Nerva, N-E-R-V-A, assumed power in Rome, released John in 96 AD, and shortly after that, he wrote down the revelation that he had been given. And the verse that always strikes me when I start to read Revelation is Revelation 1:1. Write down the things which will begin happening shortly. Because if you add up the amount of years from that time, it's 1,924. My curiosity has always been, are we still waiting for something to happen shortly? Or have things already taken place in world history that would fit the seals and the trumpets? So I sat down to find out, basically. And that's what I'm going to go through today. What if the seals and the trumpets begin happening shortly after John got his revelation? So we begin basically at 2nd century AD, between 100 to 200. Remember, Rome had already been established, and by this time, Rome, the conquering Rome, was 160 years old. They had power in a lot of the land mass of the known world, and they were still expanding. The 2nd century, from 100 to 200, and if you want to narrow it down, from 96 AD to 180 AD was considered the golden age of the Roman Empire. There were 5 named emperors named Nerva, Trajan, Hadrian, Antoninus Pius, and Marcus Aurelius. We know that name from movies. But the historian Gibbon calls this 100 years the golden age of the empire. It was that, and this is a quote, it was the happiest and most prosperous period in the entire history of the human race. And that's saying something. With all the persecution that was going on, with all the people that were dying, with Rome having been burned, with Jerusalem having been burned, with all the things that are going on, it was still the happiest and most prosperous time. Well, for the dictator, yes. Right? Not maybe for the little guy out trying to hoe his field and grow a crop. So that's 100 years that we take right there. That could be the first seal, because we see conquering, we see expansion, we see happiness. Could it be the first seal? What follows then? Revelation says the second seal is basically, you could call it war or civil war. In the 3rd century, from 200 to 300, there were over 50 contenders for the throne. 27 named emperors that I counted. Again, the cell phone's it's great. You just key in a few words and here comes a list. 27 named emperors from 200 to 300 AD, which meant that there was a lot of civil war amongst the factions who were vying to be emperor, and the emperor is trying to fend off what's coming. Because of all that war and all the regions that are involved, you can't grow crops. It's pretty tough. I mean, we've seen that in our history in various countries like Rwanda, Rhodesia, Congo, and other places where civil war, the people are starving to death. So 100 years of civil war brings on the 3rd and 4th seal, which is famine, pestilence, disease, wild animals, and death. It's estimated that over half the population of the Roman Empire died during that first 400 years. But keep in mind, we're still in the Roman Empire. They still have control. And it looks like to me, from what I read of how it's pictured, the things that take place, we've already been through 4 seals. The 5th seal talked about the martyrs, which stands to reason. There's 200 or 300 million people in the earth by this time. Persecution of the church, there's 10 recorded imperial persecutions listed. 10. So an emperor will set out specifically to kill Christians. Of course, a lot of other people die along with it. From Nero to Diocletian, 10 persecutions that were named. Come to the 6th seal. We're already to the 6th seal, and we've now come forward in history 500 years. Think about it if we were to start the seals today and project if it took this long. We would be a lot longer in human history than we think we are. Since we're getting ready to go to 7,000 years, we kind of hope that last millennium is the kingdom. Well, we're almost there. Constantine in 312 declared himself to be Christian, and I think the historians and the commentaries have it wrong. I think they should call it Catholic, because I think that's what we're seeing in history is the rise of the Roman Catholic Church. I put Christian in quotes in my notes. He made Christianity the religion of the court and moved the capital from Rome to Constantinople. So now you've got an empire so big that stretched so far, you start seeing tugs and pulls of problems in the empire. Theodosius in 370, he ruled from 378 to 395, which is late in the 4th century, declared Christianity the state religion. So now he's declared the entire empire to be Christian. But it's not the Christian we know. It's not the Christian way we keep. It's a different Christianity. It's Sunday, S-U-N-D-A-Y. It's pomp, circumstance. It's red robes. It's whatever they wear on their heads. It's cruel. It's inhumane. And if you don't sign up, you die. Again, a look to the martyrs. There's references in Revelation about the 12 tribes and an innumerable multitude. We can see why. If the state religion is one religion and everybody has to comply, there's a lot of people that aren't going to comply. I mean, how many of us have not got a shot yet, right? I'm not complying, at least not yet. I've stayed healthy, thanks to the Father. And preparation, hand washing, wearing the mask when I had to, which I hate, but I do just because it's the right thing to do right now. But for Sabbath-keeping people, it wasn't the right thing to be a Sunday-keeping Christian. So we have martyrs come out of the period. Part of the 6th seal is an earthquake. And I looked. This was an interesting part for me because there are actually earthquakes that were listed on my phone. There was an earthquake in 447 in Constantinople. Interesting, where it would have been done. Large sections of the outer wall were destroyed. 57 towers came down. Many thousands of people were perished as victims of the quake, starvation, and the noxious smell. Now, I don't know what all that would include, but you could imagine the grief, the pain, and to the extent that everybody suffered because that had taken place, and it's right there in the Bible at that particular time, and that year could fit right in. Before the 7th seal is opened, we have a little bit of an interlude, and I won't go through that. We come to the trumpets because the trumpets are within that last seal. And these were interesting because when I read in the Bible and I see all of the heavenly signs and all of the things that were listed, it's hard to think that it may be caused by man or whatever. But in the year 409, Goths, which are from the north, and as far as I could tell from somewhere in Germany, poured into Italy with savage fury. Now, Italy had not been invaded in, I think, 800 years. and Italy gets invaded with savage fury. They left behind burning cities and scorched, bloody, and desolate lands. So they came in, torched everything that they could put to fire, probably knocked the houses down, killed the people, and then marched on. Shortly after that, in 422, the Vandals swept across Gaul, which I think is France, and Spain into Africa, built a navy, and for 30 years fought the Roman navy. Now we're talking about this trumpet being on the sea. What happens when you get two navies fighting? Especially in that period of time, if you've got oil lamps on your vessel for nighttime or whatever, you have this giant fireball because you have wooden ships burning. And they're in the sea, probably in the Med. It fits. What if it's true? In 440, Attila the Hun, and that's a name that we recognize, gathered an 800-man army, appeared on the banks of the Danube River, pushed west, I'm having trouble speaking, and met the Roman army. What's left of it. The Romans were defeated with an awful slaughter around three rivers, the Marne, the Rhone, and the Po. The rivers actually ran with blood. Now, the trumpet says something about the rivers. These battles were fought around three rivers. The rivers ran with blood, and when Attila the Hun died, his followers, his soldiers, rerouted the Danube River so that he could be buried underneath the bed of the river, and the river has flowed over his body ever since, over his grave. That man obviously had a great impact in what took place in that year. In 476, Odeacer, Odeacer, I just figured it's Odeacer, had gathered a horde of barbarians, besieged Rome, and conquered Rome. So there's 1/3 of the Roman Empire gone. You have Asia, and then you have Constantinople. There's 3 parts to the kingdom according to the things that I read. So in the Bible, when it says 1/3 died, we could say that, yes, that's correct. 1/3 of the Roman army, the Roman Empire, perished at that particular time. So we're already into 4 trumpets. The 5th trumpet's my favorite because of the imagery that we read in there. I'm just going to turn and read that real quick. Revelation 9, verse 3, out of the smoke, out of the smoke, locusts came upon the earth. To them was given power as of scorpions of the earth to have power. They were commanded not to harm the grass or any green thing, but only those men who do not have the seal of God on their foreheads. They were also not given authority to kill them, but to torment them for 5 months. Let's see. Okay, verse 7. The shape are like horses. So that puts an image in your head. It's a horse. Because I'm trying to think what technology today would look like a horse. If we were to, be reading in present day, what would that look like? I've heard people say I like helicopters, or, you got jets, you got all the things that go on. I've seen pictures of jet fighters. Helen showed me a picture of a jet fighter breaking the sound barrier, and there's this giant ring of vapor around the plane as it goes through the hole. That would, I guess, if you had enough of those doing that, that would make some crazy things in the sky. But you see all this here where they have horses prepared for battle. The heads were crowns of something like gold. Their faces were faces of men, but they had women's hair. In 630, Muhammad, our buddy that wrote the Quran, a descendant of Ishmael, gathered an army who were riding horses, fierce, relentless horsemen, had long flowing beards like women's hair, yellow turbans, that would look like a gold crown, I suppose, and iron coats of armor. And the crazy thing is, Muhammad had given strict instructions for his soldiers not to harm the vegetation. What if? Does it fit? Maybe. And for 150 years, they fought in world conquest. You start putting the numbers together, 5 months. And you also have to understand that Arabia, where they started from, was like the place where the locusts would be from. It was a place where locusts grew. Arabia was conquered first by Muhammad, then Syria in 634, Jerusalem in 637, Egypt in 638, Persia in 640, North Africa in 689, and Spain in 711. When he got to France, this army was defeated. Now, Muhammad only lived from 570 to 632. So what he started in 630, he died 2 years later, and a succession of men took over the armies, and they kept running for 150 years, all the way till they got to France, and they were defeated at France by a man named Charles Martel, who was connected to Charlemagne. So, is it possible that Muhammad filled that fifth trumpet? It seems like it could be, especially when you say. When you read that Muhammad told him not to kill the vegetation, his thinking must have been that when they came in, don't destroy everything and have to regrow it. Use the crops, use the homes. The people are going to be there to be your servants and your slaves. It seems like he figured out how to conquer a land without destroying it altogether. Crazy thing is, and this bears out in history, by the way, Harun al-Rashid, who ruled from 786 to 809, at the height of conquest. I mean, they were probably set to go wherever they wanted to go and keep conquering. But at the height of their conquest and glory, capitulated and decided to cultivate peaceful relations with other nations. They do it today. That's what's happening today. The Muslim people will come from a nation, ingratiate themselves in a town, work hard, businesses, run for city council, and pretty soon they have a vote. You get enough votes and you've got a tribunal in your town instead of a judge and jury. It's happening all over this country. It's almost like that trumpet's still going. And you can see what it would do and how it would affect Sabbath keepers, Christians, maybe even Sunday keepers. I guess if you're not one of them, you're an infidel. It would pretty much go for everybody. The sixth trumpet is even worse than the fifth, in that Turks, which are also Mohammedans, appeared on the Euphrates River, 200 million strong, on horseback, marched west, replacing the Arabians as rulers of the Mohammed lands. They were more cruel and less tolerant. So they obviously didn't care if they destroyed human beings. They didn't care if they destroyed vegetation. They were out to just take the land over. Their barbaric treatment led to the Crusades, which is about a 300-year campaign from Europe, Western Europe. And, you know, anybody that's watched Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, you know, that may give us some inclination of what it might have been like. Knowing about the Knights Templar and all the things that the Catholic popes did, that group was a bunch of thugs, looting and stealing. 300 years they fought, and Constantinople fell. 1453, the Roman Empire is finally defeated. That's almost 1,500 years in human history from the first century to the time Constantinople was defeated. They were defeated in Vienna by the Polish army led by John Sobieski, another big name. It makes you wonder, it made me wonder when I read side by side world history and the Bible, what if this is true? Where would that put us today? Because when you get to the end of the sixth trumpet and the seventh trumpet is about to be blown, we get to chapter 10. Now, chapter 10 is pretty important. And I want to dig a little deeper in that, because I think it has for us, if the what if is true, if what I have gone through in history is true, and the trumpets and the seals, the trumpets have blown, the seals were opened, if that's all been completed, it puts us in a very interesting position today. It's exciting because, I mean, we would be so close to the kingdom. It's also a little scary because I question, am I ready for what's coming? Because let's read chapter 10. And I think we'll see why I ask myself if I'm ready. Revelation 10 verse 1, I saw still another mighty angel coming down from heaven, clothed with a cloud, and a rainbow was on his head. His face was like the sun, and his feet like pillars of fire. Almost sounds like Jesus Christ a little bit. He had a little book in his hand, set his right foot on the sea, his left foot on the land, and cried with a loud voice as when a lion roars. When he cried out, 7 thunders uttered their voices. Now notice what's coming. 7 thunders are uttering, they're talking, they're speaking. John's got his notebook in his hand, and he's ready to take it down. When the 7 thunders uttered their voices, verse 4, I was about to write, John says, but I heard a voice from heaven saying, seal up the things which the 7 thunders uttered, and do not write them. It almost sounds like somebody put out the yellow flag in racing, or they called a timeout, or whatever, because it seems like we're going into a pause here. As we continue, I think we can bear that out. The angel, verse 5, whom I saw standing on the sea and on the land, raised up his hand to heaven and swore by him who lives forever and ever, who created heaven and the things that are in it, the earth, the things that are in it, the sea, the things that are in it, that there should be delay no longer. Follow me on this. But in the days of the sounding of the 7th angel, when he is about to sound, we're still waiting for the 7th trumpet, the mystery of God would be finished. What's the mystery of God? John Reedy could come up and read the same verse he read a few weeks ago, because that's really what it is. Go back to Ephesians 3. Hold your place here and go to Ephesians 3. Start in verse 1. Paul says, for this reason I, Paul, the prisoner of Christ Jesus, for you Gentiles, in other words, other nations besides Israel, if indeed you have heard of the stewardship of the grace of God which was given to me for you, how that by revelation he has made known to me the mystery, as I've already briefly written, that when you read you can understand. Verse 5, the mystery in Christ, which in other ages was not known, but it now has been revealed by the Holy Spirit and the apostles, that the Gentiles, all other nations other than Israel, should be fellow heirs. That started after Pentecost, after Jesus had ascended. That mystery has been in play since Pentecost, the first one. They should be fellow heirs of the same body and partakers of his promise in Christ through the gospel, which we are supposed to be preaching. Now, If that's the mystery, and I do believe it is, and we're still waiting for it to be finished, how close are we? You stop and think about it for a little bit. We left off in history at about 1500. Since then, the United States and British Commonwealth have become very great nations. I got a list here. The printing press was invented in about 1440. The Protestant Reformation began in 1517. The Industrial Revolution took off after the Civil War, followed by the telegraph, the telephone, electricity, and, oh, by the way, the World Wide Web. When you start looking at all the things that have been done in history from the Civil War forward, perhaps, you take this phone out and you put it on the right place, and it's got a CGI app that you could watch services, you can watch Bible studies, right? How many more of them are there? Hundreds, thousands? This day, right now, is probably the best time to be alive in the world if you want to find out about Christ. It's right here. All the printing presses that could print the Bible, they have been sent all over the world. Mail, telegraph, telephone, make a phone call. You can talk to somebody in Russia or Indonesia or whatever and spread the gospel. Missionaries have gone all around the world from all kinds of denominations. Wars have been fought. Famines, pestilence, hurricanes, earthquakes have all happened. It's just what takes place with mankind. But today, because of what's in this little box right here, every man, woman, and child can find out about Jesus Christ. And it's the only time in human history. Think about that. How close are we to the seventh trumpet blowing? Because the what if for me is, what if that was just a warm-up and we've got to go through all that again in some way for history to play out? Can you imagine what the technology would do to this earth given the things that we can do with atoms and fusion and nerve gases and all the other things that are out there that can be used on people today? We would pretty much annihilate every last human being off the face of the earth. To me, it's really, really sobering. So I have to say, what if? Where are we? Are we ready if we are that close to the trumpet? The descendants of Ishmael, they're still there. They're a great nation. Ishmael had 12 sons and a daughter. Daughter married Esau. The rest of the guys, they're kings of nations in their own right. And they have grown to a very large number in the Middle East, and they're spreading over here and in Europe. How close are we? How long would it be before they took over governments? I mean, there are cities, as I've already said, that have already started governing by tribunals. So we see in chapter 10, going back to Revelation, that verse 7, in the days of the sounding of the seventh angel, when he is about to sound, the mystery of God would be finished. With the technology we have, how long will it be before this verse is completed? I don't have any way of knowing. But Helen and I were talking on the way over here today, and I remember, you watch a James Bond movie, there's so much technology in that. I remember watching Angelina Jolie and Lara Croft, Tomb Raider. There's a place where she's in Singapore or somewhere in this little canoe thing, and she paddles up to a junk, Chinese junk, and the kids are watching TV, and I think she borrows this little dish about this big around, sets it down, it does its thing, points to a satellite, and she makes a phone call. If they have them in remote places, people can get information and find God. I have a feeling we need to really find God too. We need to get close, because if I'm right, if my thinking is correct, if there's any shred that this could be true, we are very, very close to the end. Closing, I want to turn to Psalms and just read one passage. Psalms 33. When I was last in Tyler 3 weeks ago, I led music, and I led a song called Trust and Obey. And that was what I was supposed to speak on today. So I want to read a verse that I would have brought to you. Psalm 33, verse 18. Get to the right chapter. Here we go. Behold, the eye of the Lord is on those who fear him. Of course, fear can mean respect, obedience. On those who hope or trust in his mercy, to deliver them from death, to keep them alive in famine. Our soul, my soul, waits for the Lord. I want to be a spirit being so bad, if only to touch little Ashenbrenner child and make him well. And for all the other children that have been born from cocaine and abuse and disease and all the other things that is rampant in this society today. He is our help and our shield, verse 20. For our heart shall rejoice in him, because we have trusted in his holy name. Are we really trusting enough that we're going to be able to go through what those 7 thunders uttered? John was not told, he was told not to write it down. And there's suspicion that it may be because things will be so bad, people would probably faint or kill themselves or whatever, because they know they wouldn't be able to take it. And that might go for us too, if we really knew what the beast system and all that entails is going to bring to this earth. We ain't seen nothing yet. We haven't seen the worst of it. But our heart shall rejoice because we've trusted in his holy name. Let your mercy, O Lord, be upon us, just as we hope in you.